Hi guys, I've got my 2018 Hilux SR5 here. Got it in the garage. There's a noise coming out from under the vehicle somewhere, which I believe to be possibly the propeller shaft. My thinking is that it is likely to be the spline fitting being worn. The symptoms of this is as I pull up to a stop sign or a stoplight, I get a clunk, and as I take off, I also get a clunk or a thud type noise. There's plenty of discussions about this on the Hilux N80 Facebook group, and a lot of people have indicated that that's possibly what the problem is. However, there's no comprehensive information on it or definitive answer whether that's the problem or not. I also believe from the messages on Facebook that a lot of mechanics, perhaps if they haven't come across this before, don't specifically know what the problem is, and it can take quite some time to find a resolution. So what we're going to have a look at today is disconnecting the tail shaft or the propeller shaft, and I'm going to run the car in front wheel drive only by selecting four wheel drive. However, there'll be no power transfer to the rear wheels. Hopefully this will help determine whether or not it is the spline in fact that is causing the problems. So let's get under the car and have a look at doing that and see how it goes. So we're under the vehicle now. Now these propeller shafts are balanced, so I'm just going to mark everything, so the whole sequence of shaft between the engine and the diff at the rear is marked so it can be specifically put back in the same orientation that it was when I removed it. So I've just used a black texter there just to mark from the output of the gearbox a straight line. These four bolts at the uni joint are going to be removed. That should disconnect me from the rear of the engine. I'm going to remove the center bearing, and I'm going to remove the universal joint right at the rear and drop that shaft out and then see how it goes. So we've got a size 17 on the bolt head and a 14 on the nut. So we'll whip these off and move on. So I've loosened all four bolts at this universal joint here. As you can see, I've still got my mark, so I can line up the whole shaft back in the same location when I choose to put it back on. To be able to turn this tail shaft around so I could access each bolt, I obviously needed to release the handbrake and jack up the rear side, one of the rear side wheels off the ground, which allows that tyre to spin when I turn this around. So I've got those loose. I'm not going to disconnect them just yet. I'm going to move down and work on just disconnecting this center bearing housing. Drop that section out, so I'll do that now. So I've used a 14mm socket just to be able to drop the strap there, and now I'll jump on these two bolts here, which will loosen that center bearing. So as you can see, I've pulled all four bolts off that rear of the tail shaft. That's the diff housing. I've dropped the center bearing out of the center, and I am just about to loosen these off here, and then hopefully that'll fall away. So after a bit of a hit with the rubber mallet, I've managed to remove the universal from the shaft out of the gearbox. So now I envisage we'll probably need to do the same to the other end. Alright, so we've successfully removed the tail shaft through from where the centre bearing was back through the diff. Tail shaft is sitting free. So the next thing we're going to do is take this vehicle for a test run. I'll whack it in four-wheel drive, and of course I'll only have front wheels driving the vehicle, but we'll see whether the noise that we've been hearing as we stop at a stop line or take off from a stop line, whether that clunk disappears. We'll also have a bit of a look underneath that rubber boot at the spline. We might try and separate. We'll pull that boot off, pull the spline out, and have a look at the condition of it, and see what we can see. So I've pulled out the tail shaft. As you can see here, I've pulled off the metal clips that hold the rubber boot in place that covers the spline. I'm just trying to determine whether or not I can see any wear on the spine, either in the male or the female section. Looking at where the boot normally sits, which is about there, and the boot would fit about there. That shows us that we do have probably at least that much spline that's meshing. On the inside, the spline does go through to about there. I thought it'd be worth mentioning, while I have the tail shaft out and having good access to this centre bearing, there is a bit of slop, it seems, when I wriggle left and right, and you can feel like a positive amount of movement or looseness within this housing. I'm unsure whether it's the bearing or whether it's just the rubber housing around the bearing. Not sure if you can quite see that there, but there is that bit of movement. However, I think to rule out the bearing, I do find when I move it in this direction, it seems to run and feel quite smooth. So I'm going to leave it at this stage. I think that little bit of movement that we can see is simply the bearing fitting inside the rubber housing. It'll be also worth mentioning too that can't do it with one hand, but essentially there's no slop within the spline when I rotate these two shafts in opposing directions. It does feel nice and firm, sliding the spleen in and out. There's quite a bit of resistance there, nice and smooth. You can certainly feel this, the smoothness of the grease. Not really any slop that I don't think would contribute to the sort of clunking that we're feeling. But so I have re-greased the spline on the tail shaft. I have re-greased the universal joints, and I fitted it all back together. Put the boot on, and I'm going to take it for a test run and see if I'm getting the same looseness type slop clunk noise that I was getting before every time I would either stop or start. Not quite every time, but on most occasions. And I don't think I've mentioned at this point, there is about 100,000 kilometres on this 2018 Lux. Let's see how it goes on a test run. Alrighty guys, so I took the vehicle for a test drive. I probably did about 25 kilometres or so start stop in traffic, and essentially what I found is the clunk or the thud that I was hearing, I'm no longer getting. It appears to me that it would be the tiny amount of movement that was in the spline. Essentially I'd dismounted it, dropped this whole section out from the front all the way through to the rear, removed the cover, disconnected the spline, cleaned it, re-greased it. I used a lithium base grease, that's all I've had. But message me if you like, inbox. Hope this has helped someone.